We need to talk about like the church. First of all, I want to just start off with one of them is marriage. It seems like in the big 2026, we've idolized marriage within the church. I don't I don't know if you guys have realized this, but there's a lot of younger couples getting married. Each it seems like every other weekend, you know what I'm saying? Now, I will say there is nothing wrong with that, there's nothing wrong with marriage, that's the way God intends it, and getting married at a young age is nothing entirely new. We all know this because, our grandparents probably got married at like 14 and 16. You know what I'm saying? So like this is nothing new. However, I don't think, this is just my opinion though, I do believe that we have idolized marriage within the church. Now, let me explain. I don't know about you, but like I said, there's a lot of people getting married at a young age. And it almost seems that like we encourage that. And what I mean by that is that that's like the main priority within like young adults ministry and young adults groups or whatever. It's always about like, getting yourself together so that you can become, married or whatever. I will say for a young man in general, just within the church, it is very hard. It is very hard, not only in society, but in the church as well. It's super hard to be a young man. But especially when you're in these different, groups or whatever, where they're always talking about marriage and stuff, not just like young adults, but like just in general, right? If you're a young guy, right, it's always like you need to do better, right? It's all like not like it's all your fault, but like you need to do better, right? You need to stop looking at porn. You need to stop with your anger. You need to stop doing all of this, right? And then keep on pursuing God, right? Doesn't sound, too terrible on paper. However, it always seems like it always falls onto young men. Why is that an issue? That's not entirely true. Now, I will agree that, young men do have some difficulties in life, but it's like we can't we can't catch a break. Even at work, dude. It's just I got assaulted at work, you know what I'm saying? And I didn't tell anyone about it because it's not that big of a deal, you know what I'm saying? And I'm not gonna play victim or whatever because it's not a big deal, right? Now, if that happened to a girl, like yeah, it'd be the end of the world. Like holy crap, like you would hear it on the news or whatever. I'm not saying I'm like I don't like women, but when it comes to women in the church, there doesn't seem to be any type of problems that women have. Now, I don't know what women talk about within the church, but based on what I hear from like different groups and even being in church in general, it's always the guy's fault. Like there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with women, but it's always like men like do better. I don't know if you've been in this situation, but you finally choose a group to go into, right? And it's more of like a not like a like Bible study. It's kind of like a social type that's faith based or whatever. Um, and like you walk in or whatever, and I've been to many groups like this, but like you walk in and you go inside and there just seems to be nothing there. Like everyone's talking and stuff, nothing wrong with that. However, if you're new to the group, no one ever comes up and talks to you. No one ever says like, "Hi, my name is Wesley, and this is this is what the group is. This is what we do." You know what I'm saying? There's no one like that. Instead, you kind of just have to sit there and like kind of like stand around, look like an idiot. Thinking in your head, this was a terrible idea. This was a mistake. I shouldn't have came because I just look terrible. Like I look like I don't know how to talk to people. I look like I'm shy, which I'm not. You know and it's all clicky. Like it's seriously all clicky, and that's the problem I have with like just groups and especially Christian groups is that it's all clicky. People like to hang out with their people. There's inside jokes. Nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with this. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with this. However, it seems to become a problem when you're not including or you're not hang on when you're not inviting anyone else. And I feel so bad for like new people because even when I'm in that group, right? Let's just say there is a new person that comes in. I and I know I don't like mean to toot my own horn, but I'm usually the one that goes in and says, "Hi, my name is whatever," and I kind of like introduce them to a couple people, kind of tell them like this group does. And I even talk about the church, talk about, myself just a little bit, nothing crazy to where it's like they'll feel intimidated with a bunch of information, talk to these people or whatever, because they seem to have something in common with you. And then that's it. I kind of just like let them, do their own thing, and they start talking to people, right? I can't tell you how many times that's happened. But I shouldn't be the one that's doing that. First of all, I don't even go to groups. So like why am I the one that's like doing all of that? You know what I'm saying? I'm not complaining. I don't I don't hate doing that. It's just kind of sad to think about, like there seems to be not that option. Like it shouldn't have to be some random guy in a group that barely goes to group, that doesn't even like groups, and they introduce themselves and talk to someone, introduce them to like all the other members or people or whatever. Yeah, with the whole being married thing, like especially when you're in these groups or you're in these whatevers, like when they're talking about marriage, it's kind of like they're enforcing it, not enforcing it, but they're kind of like pressuring young adults to like, find a boyfriend, find a girlfriend, date for like a couple months or days or a year or so, and then get married, have a kid or whatever, and further the kingdom of God, right? However, that's not how it works. You know what I'm saying? I don't know about you, but the dating world is extremely hard, as a Christian male, but just in general as well. It is extremely hard. Why? Because there's a lot of standards, there's a lot of preferences, and there's a lot of icks, if you will. I can't tell you how many times I've been on dates and I'm kind of just like, I just felt empty. I kind of was just, I was talking to her, I was listening to her or whatever, and there was just nothing there. So like, do I just keep trying, do I keep, going out with girls or finding a good church girl, you know what I'm saying? But no, 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 you gotta wait on the Lord. You gotta have more faith, right? You just gotta wait on him, do all of his timing, right? It's all part of God's plan. I 100% disagree with that. Yes, there is, God's timing. There is, waiting on the Lord. That is a possibility. However, I do also believe that God has given us many options to just do it. Just do it. Quit waiting on the Lord. Like not like in a bad way, but like quit waiting on the Lord, trying to have him do like all the work for you and just do it yourself. But like we don't encourage that. We don't say that. If we do, we always say like always find a church girl, always find a church man, you know what I'm saying? Find a woman of God, find a woman or find a man of God, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. However, I don't know about you, but if you have any girls in your church, they're honestly no different from the ones you see at the gym, in the library, or just anywhere in general. We're all human, and I'm not judging in any case or any way. But, it's kind of the same thing. You talk to this girl, introduce yourself, you talk over text and stuff, and, sometimes they'll just ghost you. And it's like, huh? And then, like, you don't ever see them again because, like, they go to, like, a different service or whatever, And it's kind of like, what? What am I doing? Like, why did I just do that? I just wasted my time, So I gotta try it again. You do the same thing, same process, same ways, and you end up in the same position, just a different, way of going out or whatever, right? So it's like, okay, well, I'm not gonna search for girls in the church anymore. I'm just gonna start, searching the places that I go to commonly, places that I really love doing, like going to the gym, the library, shopping, bowling, or doing whatever, and you'll meet someone there because you want to meet people that have the same interests and similarities, and that's just my thing, Oh, but you can't do that because they're the worldly people. They're, not of God. So it's like you can't do that, We all know that you're not supposed to be with someone outside of the church, right? But it almost seems like when you're in the church and you're doing those things and you're looking for those options, there seems to be nothing there. So like, what do you do? Anyways, back to what I was saying. It's almost as if we're putting a lot of pressure onto young adults, because you'll see it on social media, you'll see it on your friend groups, in your family groups, that they're just getting married left and right, and you're just kind of sitting here. You're like in your, you just turned 18, right? Why haven't I got married yet, you know? Or you're 25 or going into your 30s or whatever, and you're still not married, right? Sometimes you've never even had a boyfriend or a girlfriend. You've never been in a relationship, and you're kind of waiting there, like, why am I just like not? Why am I single? You know, uh, I'm waiting on the Lord. I freaking waited for like 15 or 10 years, and still nothing's happened. I just gotta wait on the Lord, right? So it's like when we do this stuff, we're putting a lot of pressure onto onto young adults, and older adults as well, and we're just kind of leaving them in the dust. Those that aren't married, or don't even have a girlfriend or boyfriend, it's really sad to think about, how we just have missed the point, the entirety of groups. It's always about one certain, thing. And then like especially the younger adults, it's tough for them. My heart goes out to them, especially for them, because like I said, they probably just turned 18 or whatever, and they probably do have a boyfriend, they have a girlfriend or whatever, and they're kind of expecting, to get married or whatever, especially if they're a person like in the church, it's like, ooh, when am I gonna get married, whatever. But like nothing happens, you gotta wait on God's timing, and even for the older people or just somewhere in the middle, you kind of just feel a little sad, feel a little depressed. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, man, I kind of feel lonely. I feel isolated. I have friends. I have groups I can go to, but it's like at the same time, I don't have intimate connection with someone. I would like to share that with someone. But oh no, that's not how it works, right? The real intimacy comes from the Lord, right? That's how you feel less alone. That's how you feel your problems will go away. That's just how, things are, that's how things get better, right? Yeah, so that's something we've heavily idolized within the church, and we've completely missed the point. And if you disagree with me, go ahead and comment. We can have a discussion about it. We don't have, it's not a debate. We can just have a discussion, right? But yeah, it's tough. Why am I even wearing these? Another thing I want to talk about is mental health. Mental health is a really touchy subject in the church, right? Because it can go multiple different ways, right? Oh, trust in the Lord. God loves you. You know what I'm saying? You don't have enough faith, right? I'm not going to go into specifics of what I go through because it's not relevant to what I'm talking about. And plus, it's like not everyone needs to know. That's another thing. Not everyone needs to know every situation that goes on in your life. Cause yes, I mean that's cool and all, but like same thing with like the groups and young adults. Younger people are trying to find their people, trying to find their someone. And like I was saying with all the marriage stuff, they're trying to look for that, right? There's nothing wrong with that, right? Community's never a bad option. However, if you do find that group, if you do find that someone, they are not going to speak to God for you. That's you and him. That is entirely you and him. That's the whole relationship dynamic. And like I was talking about this with someone, they were telling me different problems and stuff that they were going through, and I was trying to talk to them, help them in any way. I didn't really provide a whole lot of information or a whole lot of advice, but I did say some things are just between you and God. Like I can't really do anything about it. It's just you and God at that point. You need to talk to God. You need to pray and do all that stuff. No one's gonna do it for you. We like to think so, but that's not how it works. I struggle with mental illness, not mental health, mental illness. There's a difference between those two. And especially when we're talking about that as a Christian, there's Christian depression and there's Christian anxiety. When we talk about mental health in the church, we automatically think of depression. We automatically think of anxiety, right? Those are the two that are just exist. And I've ran into this so many times because I do do ministry in that field. I also have been through this stuff myself, right? If you're someone struggling with actual mental illness, I'm talking about like OCD, the real OCD, not the like, oh my gosh, I gotta put this stuff away, I gotta clean up, not that type of OCD. That's the TikTok OCD, but like the actual OCD to where you're thinking, you're constantly thinking whether like if you got home, right, and you're expecting someone to come, right, do you lock the door? First of all, that sounds kind of crazy, right? But no, it sounds pretty reasonable because if you lock the door, then they could be like 2 hours away, an hour away, or whatever, and you live in a bad part of town. You just live in a city in general, or a place where there's a lot of people, right? A lot of possibilities, right? I'm not trying to scare you guys or whatever. I'm just using this as an example. So do you lock it? Because if you lock it, you're going to be safe, right? You're going to feel good about that. You're going to feel more secured. At the same time, if you're in the shower or if you're in the bathroom or wherever, you're not able to access the door right away. They're going to be left outside, kind of like trying to get in. And they're texting you and stuff, but you don't know it's them. They're trying to get inside, and it's because you locked the door, right? And then potentially they could be in trouble. They could be in danger. Oh no. Or do you just leave it open? That's pretty self-explanatory of like, there's so many people that could come into my house. There's a lot of people that can enter in and just do whatever, right? Or I'm just kind of scared that like leaving my door open because of, past experiences or different scenarios that pop in your head, right? That go through your head, that you plan out, that you can actually see in so many ways, right? That's the type of OCD we're talking about. I don't struggle with OCD. I'm just gonna say that. So I don't know exactly what it's like based on my experiences and different experiences with helping people. That's what I see as OCD. It's just that constant overthinking of like, if I don't do this, something could happen, right? But I'm talking about like, anyways, what I was talking about was like, it was actual OCD. We're talking about paranoia, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, eating disorders, that type of mental health, right? We don't talk about that because we automatically assume it's depression or anxiety, right? So let's just say someone struggles with schizophrenia, right? Let's just go with that. Yeah, we got a paranoid schizophrenic guy. So if you go inside of a church, right, and you're looking for resources, because it's like, I am involved in this faith thing, and I do believe in God, and I do love God. So it's like, I'm gonna talk to God about it, and I'm gonna go to the church, right? I'm gonna see if they help me, right? So let's just say that they're worshiping, they're doing their own thing, and they have prayer partners or whatever they're called, or prayer team or something. I know a lot of churches have that. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying. They provide that opportunity, right? And you go up to them. You finally go up to them because it takes a lot of courage to ask for help. It takes a lot of, just boldness to do that. Openly admit that you struggle with this thing. You've never really told anyone about it because you're afraid how they're gonna react. You're afraid how they're gonna take it. You're afraid it's gonna cause division, right? Because it's something so severe, like schizophrenia. When we talk about schizophrenia, we talk about like people that are crazy. I'm going to use the C word because it's crazy. We're not like it's crazy, but I'm saying like because they perceive people like that as crazy, right? Anyways, you finally go up to that person and you tell them about your situation, right? There's two different ways it can go, or it can go both ways. The first way is that they think you're crazy, not crazy, but like they think you're possessed, or they think that you got some evil spiritual, demons or whatever, possessing you, and they're like spirits hanging around you, whatnot. Which kind of entails with my other reason is that you got to have more faith, right? I'll pray for you. They got like a whole bunch of people going over you. They got their arms around like this. What I'm saying, and they're just praying for you, right? And some people are just kind of like doing the whole, what I'm saying? And it's kind of like freaking you out because it's like, first of all, you're paranoid schizophrenic, so that's not making it worse. It's actually kind of triggering, right? They're praying for you, or that someone prays for you, and that's it. Like they don't do anything else, and you don't talk about that in the church because they're gonna, if you want to be involved in the church too, they're gonna exclude opportunities. They're gonna, kick you out of certain things, not kick you out, but like remove you from certain things just because it's like they don't trust you, right? Like they said, like I've said, some of people in church have never experienced life. I'm gonna get into that real quick, but so they're not aware of like the whole schizophrenia type or mental illness or whatever, and they only get like the stigmas around it, right? The I guess you could say the stereotypes. And they just tell you to have more faith. I mean, there's different ways they can tell you to do that, but it's like, I'll be praying for you, man. That's it, let's just we're assuming that they're not gonna like do the whole like praying over you and having saying like come everyone come here or whatever, or like the person on stage is saying like come bring him up or whatever. This man is struggling with evil spirits, evil demons, right? They're kind of just like putting you on the spot, right? Let's just assume they're not doing that, right? They're not assuming that you're crazy, you're demon possessed, right? And they have to perform an exorcism. You're just kind of left like empty because it's like, okay, prayer's good, but it's like nothing happens. You gotta have more faith. First of all, what do you think I'm not doing? If I'm like a true believing follower of Christ, right? Am I not already doing that? Like, do you think I'm just some stupid person? That person is just really stupid into thinking that, prayer works or faith works. In that situation, you're mad if you have like the OCD or the bipolar, or if you have like the whatever I was talking about. If you have any of that, right? Then you're at this point you're just mad because like do you think this is just kind of like a situation where it's like, oh, my relationship with Christ is failing, and because of that I'm dealing with all of this sin, or I'm on the right path, I'm pursuing God, I'm pursuing ministry, I'm doing all that, and it's spiritual warfare. At the end of the day, it is spiritual warfare. That it's so, I like to say it's so unintentionally ignorant of them to say that, because it's kind of like the easy answer, the easy way out, you know what I'm saying? They'll say like, James 1 says, consider it pure joy that we go through these sufferings. First of all, why would I consider it a pure joy if I'm going through this suffering, right? Now let's automatically assume that this person's new to the faith, right? What does this mean? Like, they're already trying to get into the faith. No one's helping them, by the way. They're already trying to get them into the faith, or they're already trying to get in the faith, and you tell them that, or in a certain way, but you tell them that, to just pray more, pursue God, consider it a pure joy that you're going through a suffering? What? Why would I do that? I'm already going through a tough time. I'm going through some real stuff, and you interrupt me saying that. I just got here. I just got here. I'm new to this faith thing, and you're telling me to have more faith? What do you mean? I thought like if I follow God, all my problems would go away. That's the type of problem that we have with like the mental health in the church, right? The best thing you can do with helping those type of people, or just helping people in general, is just shut up, stop talking, like stop trying to automatically, provide advice. It's kind of like talking to a girl, right? Your girl has problems or whatever. You don't just say stuff right away. You let them talk. You let them speak. You let them say their mind, even if it's something like contradictory from the Bible or from the faith, right? Let them talk. Stop bringing up James 1. No one's going to want to hear that. That is not the answer that they want, right? I'm so sick and tired of hearing that. Like Romans 8:18, how it's talking about how like your sufferings today aren't going to be comparable to like what you're going to experience joy within the future, right? We're talking about those verses. It's just so frustrating. It is very frustrating to hear all of that. And it's exhausting. And at some point, you just give up. You just stop looking for answers. You just stop going to like the church, or you stop looking for help in the church. And even then, there's no options and there's no help for you. So you actually feel hopeless, right? You shouldn't feel that way because you're in church, you're in the house of the Lord, but you do feel that way. And even as like if you're a Christian struggling, like you start seeing a therapist, you actually get on medications. Now a lot of people don't like medicine like that, like prescribed medicine, which I do agree. I mean, there's some stuff in there that is absolutely atrocious, because then you got to find the right medicine that's right for you. You probably have to go through like 3 or 5 or something at the beginning when you're starting out, just to see like which one has the less symptoms of you feeling dizzy and doing all of that, right? But you finally land on a med, right? And you do talk to someone again in the church, and you mention that like I've been on medications, I've been doing great. And they're saying, they're talking. It's their time. It's their turn to talk, right? They have like they have the talking ball or something, right? It's their turn to speak, and they're just speaking, and all of a sudden they're saying like, man, when I was on medications, I just got off cold turkey, and I just truly followed the faith and I truly pursued the Lord, and I'm by the grace of God, it went away. I'm not saying that's not possible. Anything is possible with God, right? And I know people are gonna say like this guy's a doubting Thomas, this guy's a heretic, if we even still use that word. I'm just saying like there are problems that we have. Anyways, if you say that, then it's like, first of all, that is not ideal. I mean, if you know anything about prescribed medicine, especially if you've been on it for a while, we're talking about like a year, months, or whatever, extended years. You don't do that. You seriously don't. Even at that point, if you miss a med for that day or for that night, you're gonna have consequences. You're gonna feel sick, right? That it's just not ideal to go to cold turkey, right? But it's because of this prolonged medication for like years, that because of the like there's nothing there, right? There's nothing there, so you just got to continue to go to therapy, take your medicine, check up with your doctor, try to stay away from certain things that you struggle with, like alcohol or whatever, right? And they just say that it is truly, it's so unintentionally ignorant, and it's exhausting to hear, having someone tell me that they've been told that. It's so bad. Like last week I was on the phone with a guy. He was actually probably going to kill himself, right? He was telling me he was going to kill himself. He was going to kill himself, right? And I was listening to him. I truly believe that is what saved him. Obviously, all glory goes to God, but I truly believe it's because, I shut my mouth. I didn't say anything. I didn't bring up James 1. And I just listened, Obviously, him and I have some similar experiences, and he was actually talking about the problems I was talking about now within the church. And even then, I was thinking about this for a long time, and God put me in that position for a reason. I've been through some things. I've been through some struggles to where I can actually help someone like that. That is what they like. That is what I mean when they say like, you know, since because of your like, if you're saying like I'm dealing this well, whatever, they're probably gonna say like, like it's consider a pure joy that you're going through all this, because in the near future when someone else is talking to you, you have the same similar experiences, so you can share with them. Like that's what they apparently mean by that. But they're talking about like in the church, like only in the church, right? Nah, bro. There are actual people that deal with some real crap, deal with some real ish. You know what I'm saying? And like I was saying, I truly listened to him, and we figured out a plan. We did all of that, and he didn't kill himself. Right? It was such a blessing to hear that he was actually like, you can tell in the tone of his voice, like that he was relieved. He was finally heard. He was finally listened to. That's so sad. That is so sad that like it's so sad that they go to that lengths to where they want to end their life because it's like no one's listening to them, even in the church, right? Another thing I want to mention is there's just no resources out there for faith-based health or help with mental illness. Even then, you don't want to go into that therapy crap. You don't want to go into that, hibby jibby or gushy tush sappy crap. You don't want to get into that because like it's just kind of like, ugh, I don't even like being hugged or whatever. What makes you think I'm gonna be open and honest, right? It's intimidating, right? That's just for anyone. Therapy is intimidating for everyone, right? But like there is no resources out there, and even then it's just not the best. It is not the best. I'm telling you what. It's actually really sad, especially from a Christian point of view. It's like, like God is able to do anything. He can do anything, in his will, right? And you are going through these things for a reason, right? You truly have faith. There's nothing wrong with your relationship with you and God. There's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing going on, nothing negative going on. However, people are telling you all the time that you need to have more faith. What do you think they're not doing, right? It's so sad. But even then, like if you look up on YouTube, let's just use example like OCD, how to deal with OCD as a Christian, right? Or how to deal with paranoia as a Christian. You are not going to find anything on there. I guarantee you are not going to find anything on there. Even if you do, like search it up on the internet too, like you're going to find something that's like from 50 years ago, and mental health and illness was not looked at fondly. It wasn't, saw as it is today. You know what I'm saying? because nowadays we glorify it now. It's a personality trait. It's just part of who I am. You gotta accept me for who I am. Shut up. Dang. So you do go out and reach out to a group, and like I said, they just do the same thing, man. It's just so sad. I've received so much advice, so many life changing, experiences and conversations that were people that weren't of the church, right? I talked to a lot of Marines and ex-military guys, and Marines in specific, because I was going to go into the Marines, but I know I got disqualified twice. Whatever, huge story. That was a terrible time. Anyways, nah, I've talked to many people like that. I've talked to guys that were divorced. I've talked to people. I've talked to women too. Just people just going through some absolute crap. Just the reality of life. I don't mean to sound hateful. I really don't. But as you can see, I'm just really frustrated. I'm tired of it. But like I've talked to those guys, and they offer some help. They offer like immediate help. You know what I'm saying? That's a problem. It truly is a problem. Why? Because I'm not receiving that in the church. I'm receiving it from somewhere outside into the scary world of reality. You know what I'm saying? But like what I was saying, they just offer immediate help. Whether, you use your discernment, obviously you're not going to follow through with whatever, all that they say. I've had many situations where it's like, yeah, man, if you ever need someone to talk to, we can, chill at my place in my garage, pop open a beer and just like, not even talk, but just do, just like sit there, take in the air, fresh air, what Mother Nature, that sounds really inviting. And I've actually done stuff like that, Obviously, I didn't partake in the drinking. You can believe me or don't believe me. Shut up. Sometimes the person that's struggling, surprisingly, doesn't even want to talk about what they're going through, because they feel if you invite them to like a faith-based whatever, they'll feel obligated to. They'll feel like they have to. That like if you do that, it's going to be spiritually motivating, or it'll like moving, that like your life will be instantly changed or whatever. But like you're scared that it's not going to because of past experiences, right? So you just don't even partake in that. Like I was saying with the guy that was just, offering me, that chilled with me or whatever. That seems more inviting, because then it's just kind of like, I'm just sitting there and you finally like, hey, so if I were to do something like this or whatever, or I'm in this situation, what do you think about this? Here's an example. I got it from somewhere, but I kind of like put my own twist on it, right? You got two people, right? You got one person that is of the faith and one person that is not, right? They're your friends, right? They're both your friends, right? Equal friendship, or whatever. You're sitting, you're out in the public, you're doing your own thing, you're just chilling. I don't know what type of event you'll go to, but you're just there. And then all of a sudden, like there's another guy that like runs up, steals your wallet, steals your phone, steals, whatever you have, your purse or your bag, right? And it's just not good. You kind of like look at there like, what? Like what? I'm mad at that. I'm sure you guys would get pissed off if someone took your stuff, right? And the person of the faith says, man, you just gotta forgive and forget. You gotta love your enemies. Obviously, I'm exaggerating. I'm not. Not every person of the faith does this. I just wanted to clarify that, because I know there's going to be a lot of people that are going to say that. Like I said, I don't mean any hate. I don't mean any hate in any way. No disrespect. I'm obviously exaggerating some of this stuff, like 10% of the stuff. But no. But the one guy saying like, man, that's all materialistic, man. We can get it back. We can get your phone. We can get a new phone. I'll pay for your phone. Your money, I can help you with dinner or whatever. That cool, sweet, whatever. And they're saying like, I'll pray for you right now, right? And you'll leave and they'll be like, man, I'm sorry to hear about that. I'll be praying for you, man. If you ever need anything, let me know. Okay, that's cool. That's really cool. However, you have the other guy. You're talking, chilling, do your own thing. Same situation. They take your stuff. They go out running, and you kind of look at each other like, what the heck, And the guy was like, hold on, wait here. I'm gonna get your stuff back, right? Here, take my stuff, like whatever. I'm gonna get your stuff back. That guy is not leaving with your stuff. I'm gonna get that back. Why? Because I'm your friend. And they'll say something like, I may come back with a broken arm, I might get hurt or whatever, but I'm going to get your stuff back. So they go out and do that. Let me ask you a question, like, which would you rather choose? Someone that's going to say they're going to pray about it, or someone that's going to actually do something about it in front of your eyes? Like, who would you rather go to? And be honest. The guy that went and actually did something, he's not of the faith, right? That's how it is in this situation that, I've been in for the past, like, couple of years, and it's gotten worse now. But yeah, like I was saying, I just get so much advice from people that aren't of the faith, and even when I go to someone of the faith, it's the same situation, the same scenario. I'm no disrespect to anyone's parents, right? And they're saying like, man, if I had your parents when I was like 12, or if I had your parents when I was your age, man, I would not be in the situation that I'm at now. Or man, if I was in church at your age, I would not be in the situation I'm at now. So like, go talk to your parents, man. Maybe they have some answers like that. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? When I'm helping out people, by the way, I do ministry, like I lead a faith-based support recovery group for kids, right? When I'm talking to a child, when I'm talking to a kid or whatever, I don't ever mention anything about their parents. Like I don't ever say like, maybe you should talk to your parents about it. Maybe you should talk to your mom or dad. Man, this, have you talked to your parent? Like, have you talked to your dad about this? I don't ever say that, even if I know that they're of the faith. Why? You don't know their situation, right? You're not listening. You're not listening to them. Because there could be multiple ways it could go. Like one, they don't have a dad, they don't have a mom, or they don't have both, or they're living with their grandparent or uncle or whatever. They're living with someone else, probably someone that's not even related to them, probably like their mom's friend, right? You don't know. So why would you say that? Just shut up and listen. Again, I don't mean any hate. I don't mean any disrespect. I love God. And you can disagree or agree with me that I personally love God. That me personally, you're gonna judge my faith and saying like whether I love God or not. You can do that on your own, right? There's so many problems within the faith, like community, the American church, and just the whole stigmas of different things that we go through. People actually go through. So I'm going to be talking about that. It's not going to be comfortable. It's not going to be ideal. I have a lot of, if you guys know me, which most of you don't, if you guys really know me, you would know that I'm very opinionated. I love, talking about different things that I think about, I'm so sick and tired of hearing this, like, I think or I feel. Nah, what does the Bible actually say about this, right? And if you are going to say, like, I think or I feel, always, always, always make it clear that that is your opinion, right? So if you're willing to like listen and do all of that and wanting to be informed, educated, or just wanting to like listen to something, right? Please follow along with me and let's do stuff that needs to be done.